Welcome to the fourth in this series of classes on quantum spirituality, evolving our relationship to the universe. So, I thought we would talk today. We've been talking about everything being interconnected, and I had the thought that our reality is like a cosmic intranet, I-N-T-R-A-N-E-T, means everything is connected from within to everything else. And like the internet that we're familiar with, we can download things, we can upload things, but we constantly have available access to all the information that's on this cosmic intranet. But first of all, we have to know what to ask for, we have to know how to ask for it, and we have to be putting ourselves into a state of consciousness that we can tune into a particular frequency, so to speak, of what we're searching for. So I mentioned before that this computer scientist at MIT, Seth Lloyd, has theorized that the universe with a capital U is like a giant quantum computer, and it's seeking to compute itself, which means it's seeking to understand itself. And I mentioned before that the Sufis say that creation began because God was a hidden treasure desiring to be known, and God could only know by the relationship with conscious beings in manifestation, of which we are. And awakening is the process of becoming more and more conscious and capable of participating in that relationship. So, in contrast to the historical notions of God and religions and spirituality as being something just beyond existence, static, unchanging, more and more thinking is coming into alignment with what scientists have discovered, that we live in an evolving universe, that everything is evolving, including however we think of as God, the divine being, the transcendent, the cosmic wisdom, whatever you want to call that, is in a constant state of evolution. But we could say at any particular instant of time, what we think of as the divine being is constricted. Now here's a strange notion we don't usually have. Think of, well, how can God be constricted or limited? Well, the way we think of God in this sense is limited by what's possible from all that's been known up to that point and what could come from that. But as we engage in this relationship with the transcendent, with the divine, what Ibn Arabi calls our personal angel or our personal Lord, now new revelations can take place. And as I mentioned in a previous class, what's revealed is not something that was just sitting way up high somewhere and now we're aware of it. It's actually created in the process of that relationship. It's unfolded. You could think of it as unfolding wisdom or evolutionary wisdom. And in that sense, now what's possible for what we think of as God or the divine being has become more than what it was before. So we think, well, what we think of as God gives all these gifts to us. Ibn Arabi said it very beautifully. He said that God confers upon the human a mode of being, life, and the human confers upon God a mode of knowing. So we think of the gifts that we receive from above, plenty of them, all the blessings and wonders and beauty of this world, but when we engage in this process of relationship with transcendent, with the divine, we actually are giving a priceless gift back to the divine, who now becomes freed from the constriction of a previous state of being. So think about that for a moment, that we can do something. We're these limited, finite human beings, and we can offer a gift to the divine that frees the divine from a state of constriction or limitation from what's been known before. That's pretty cool, I think. All right, so how do we engage in this process? Well, we can't really engage in it if we're in our usual dualistic state of consciousness. So let me bring in a little bit of physics here. And some of you may be familiar with the notion that the act of observation does what's called collapsing the quantum wave function. So before there's a measurement taken of photons, they behave either as a particle or a wave. Can't be both at once in manifestation, but they're potentially either one, but by the act of observation, we're forcing that photon to act like a particle or act like a wave. We're narrowing down the possibilities of what that light can be. So I've been thinking for some years about, I wonder if there's the opposite of this process, so I'll invent a word, uncollapsing the quantum wave function. So it is what it is. It's in a state of potentiality of being a particle or a wave. But what if we can engage in a wave relationship that not only doesn't collapse it, but opens up this wave function to possibilities that weren't there before? So now there's the possibilities of light becoming something more than it was before. And I'll leave this for an area of exploration for you to just imagine, what could that be? How could light become something more than what it is? And we're usually just thinking of light like what comes from an incandescent or fluorescent source. The mystics talk about the all-pervading light, the light of the heavenly spheres. But even that can become something more than it was before. Okay, so fasten your seatbelts. Now another little segue. Physicists have said that, many of them are saying consciousness is more fundamental than energy or matter. And many of them are saying now that information is not the way we usually think of it, like a bunch of facts, is even more fundamental than consciousness. Okay? And many physicists are theorizing that this, what's called the quantum vacuum, this mysterious state of potentiality of which virtual particles come into and out of existence from, perhaps are a repository of all the information that ever is or has been. And so think about what in different spiritual systems is called a transmission. So if someone becomes initiated into a particular spiritual school, then they are linked up with the transmission of that tradition. And that means they're linked up with the wisdom of all the great teachers that have been in that tradition. And that's very much a reality. Okay? What's perhaps a new idea to this is not only is someone linked to that transmission of wisdom that's been, but they actually are potentially contributors to that transmission of the wisdom that can only come through them. So they're not linked to a transmission that's just the aggregate of what's been before, and it's just like a bunch of books on the shelf. That transmission is augmented and evolving by the wisdom that's contributed by the different beings there. So we have a tendency to think about great beings who lived on the earth as being fixed somehow to their historical self. There's certainly a tendency for people to think about Jesus as being fixed to Jesus' historical being, what Jesus had to say at the time of his life, and so on. And Pir Wilayat, who was my teacher for many years in the Sufi group that I belonged to, would talk about, well, there is the historical aspect of great beings, Jesus, Moses, the Prophet Muhammad, Krishna, and so on, Buddha, but there's also the cosmic aspect. So there's the historical Jesus and there's the cosmic Christ. So there is a living, ongoing transmission from each and all of these beings from their cosmic state as it exists now, although English kind of fails us here because we're thinking of now in terms of linear time, but that now is really something beyond time as well. But however you think about it, it's an ongoing evolution state. It's not something that's just fixed. So back to this notion that we live in this cosmic intranet and that we can access the information on this cosmic intranet. We can also contribute to the information in this cosmic intranet. So imagine now servers on the internet. So when you log into a site, you're connected with a server that gives you back the information that you are asking for. And imagine that there are these cosmic archetypal servers, and one of them is Christ, and one of them is Buddha, and one of them is Moses, and so on. And it's ongoing living transmissions that come from them, and people have affinities to particular beings, like certainly people in Christianity it would be to Christ, and Buddhism it would be to Buddha, and so on. So that would be the major stream, wisdom stream they would be tuning to, but there's nothing that keeps them from tuning to information from other streams. So how do we do that? Well, we have to get past our historical notion of the being that we're tuning into. That's a starting point for sure. Kind of like icons are beautiful starting points that open up to a deeper reality, but the possibilities of the icon are much more than the image that's in that two-dimensional surface that you're looking at. But if you really get into a state of resonance with that, you're not experiencing it as something separate from yourself. You're getting into a state of what I like to call relational unity, where you're not separated from it. There's an interchange of light between you and what you're experiencing, but you don't disappear either. You're still a unique individual, but you're in this intertwined state. So, starting point, yes, everything is interconnected, but to activate that, you have to engage in a state of relationship that allows this transpiring of light to take place in both directions, to open up to that. So to get into the transmission of a great being, such as Christ, you have to free yourselves from a separated sense of self. So I've talked before about some Sufi terms, fana, which means shattering. It means freeing yourself from a previous state of limitation. Then you're in an in-between state. It's like self-organization where things perhaps seem chaotic, but then you reorganize to a higher state of being. So I was just thinking this morning, in order to really tune into the transmission of some great being, we have to go through a mini fana, a mini shattering of our usual state of being, so we can open up to a possibility of relationship that's not confined to our concepts about what we think we're wanting to tune into. Okay, that's the theory part. Let's try it. So, close your eyes and just take what I'm saying as a hypothesis. Try it on for size, and some doubts are going through your mind. Go, well, what if what he's saying is the way that it is? I'll just see what happens if I try to experience in this way, or allow to experience. Because if you're trying to make something happen, it's going to block you from having the experience happen. You have to prime the pump with a desire. Like if you're using Google, you got to put something in the search engine. But in this experience, then you have to just let go. Your intention is you're wanting to open to experience the transmission of Christ as a living exchange. It's not just what you think of as Christ coming to you. It's your light going to Christ, and the light of both sides is having an impact on the other side. Each side is transforming the other side. So not only are you transformed by the light of Christ, Christ is transformed by the light of your being, which is a unique expression with access to a unique part of the divine wisdom. Okay, so just allow yourself to relax and just prime the pump, set forth this intention. I would like to be able to attune to this living transmission of Christ. And the nice thing, like when you use a search engine, you don't have to know the underpinnings, how it does what it does. You just put in your desire and trust that you're going to get a result. So you put in your desire here, and you allow yourself to come into a state of receptivity and allowance, or just allowing the experience to happen. And imagine yourself like a radio receiver that you're trying to tune to a particular station. So as you engage in this process of receptivity and allowance, you may start to get some little nibbles here or there, feelings of energy or light. And if you notice anything like that, just orient towards that. That would be a clue you're heading in the right direction. And then just allow yourself to continue to open more and more to this living two-way transmission. And let's just take a few moments to experience this. Remember Jesus saying, when two or more are gathered in my name, I am there. Well, we've got a lot more than two people here with this intention, and we are all interconnected with each other. So we have a powerful system going here to open up to this experience. Now continue with this, but if you like, I'm going to have a little add-on. I'd like to try to perhaps augment the experience even more. Recalling what I mentioned that Hazrat Inayat Khan said that the human is the only being who has his or her existence in all the realms of existence. So we exist on many realms, including the angelic realm. So imagine now that you can allow your consciousness of your being to expand and experience that, yes, you are a manifest human being, but you also continually exist in the angelic realm. You have an angelic body, which is much vaster than your physical body. And just like blood circulates through our physical body, light circulates through our different subtle bodies. And it circulates between these bodies, between the angelic body and the physical body, and returning light back up. So imagine now as you're attuning to the transmission of Christ that you are experiencing this not just through your physical self, but a much broader sense of your being that includes the angelic self as well. This is what I call multimodal consciousness. It'd be like if you took your sound system from monaural to stereo to quadraphonic to surround sound. So again, if you want to try this, just set forth that intention, and you don't have to figure out how to make it work. You're just putting forth that intention and see what happens if you attune to the transmission of Christ through a much fuller state of your being. Perhaps you notice that the quality of the light circulating has become much, much richer. It's of a different order of light, like harmonics of light. overtones of light. And on that light is conveyed wisdom, an opening to revealed wisdom. And now gently bring your awareness back to being present, sitting wherever you're listening to this class in. And notice if you feel a difference even in your physical body. Does it feel more expansive? Does it feel lighter? And notice if there's a difference in your mind. Does it feel more open like the vast blue sky? And your heart, does your heart feel wide open? And then open your eyes when you're ready. I've been reading this wonderful book by Sibley on birds. It's this big book, and it has these incredible facts about birds that just are mind-boggling. Like this one little bird can remember the location of 80,000 seeds that it stored. Little tiny bird. And hummingbirds, they, in a laboratory, can breathe just fine at an oxygen level as if they were at an elevation of 43,000 feet. Pretty mind-boggling. I mean, just all these amazing things. So this got me thinking this morning about hatching in birds and molting in reptiles and so on. For these phenomena to take place, a kind of symmetry has to be broken. Okay, well, fana, it's another way we can think of fana, F-A-N-A, instead of annihilation. Well, it's a breaking of the previous symmetry that was necessary up to a point that allowed a degree of self-organization to take place. But now, further growth is happening, further self-organization wants to occur, and for that to happen, the previous symmetry has to be broken. And so I've had this idea for a while, because oftentimes fana in different traditions is thought of as being a very traumatic event. Like in Christianity, they talk about the dark night of the soul, a period of despair where your beliefs no longer worked and so on, and that's a reality. People oftentimes go through that. So sometimes the shattering is very traumatic, through a loss, the death of a loved one, just some kind of traumatic event where your usual way of doing things no longer works anymore, usual belief system doesn't work anymore. But I've had the idea for a while about what I call the gentle fana. Instead of it being traumatic, it's like an opening, a release. So I can just imagine a crab or a snake when it molts, sheds its shell, must feel this tremendous sense of freedom. Oh, you know, it's really tight now. Oh, it feels so good. Now I've got more space. So you're welcoming this shattering because you know that it's going to lead to something that's a better state of being. So for us to have growth in our life, in our spiritual journeys, it's inevitable that we have to go through these periods of fana, release of the old way, the in-between state where things are indefinite, baka, the shifting to a higher state of being, also sometimes called resurrection. we have to go through that. Awakening is not a continuous process. And in quantum physics, it's filled with discontinuity. There's a fundamental unit of time, and anything shorter than that doesn't make any sense. It's not even defined. There's a fundamental distance of space measurement, and shorter than that, it's like the Planck unit of time and space. Doesn't make any sense. Electrons around in their orbitals can't be in continuous levels. They're either at this first orbital or they're at the second orbital, but they don't move the way we would think, just up the stairway, so to speak. They're either here or now they're in this higher energy state. There's not an in-between. So in the process of awakening, many times on the journey, it is not continuous. And when we have the greatest difficulty with fana, and it's human nature, it's because we're very reluctant to let go of what's been familiar, even if it's not working anymore. And I've used this example before, and I'll just describe it for those of you listening to the recording and can't see. When I was in my psychology practice, I would go over to the door going into my office, and I'd say to the client, well, I'm going to try to open the door, watch, and I would push on it. And I'd say, well, come tell me this isn't working. And they'd kind of look at me like, why am I doing this to this guy? You got to pull on the door. So it's human nature, and we all do this. You're trying something that doesn't work. And it could be something on your computer, it could be you're trying to open something, and it's not working, so you try it about 4 more times, and then you realize, maybe this isn't the way to do it. I need to do it a different way, and we let go of it. But when we've been in a certain station, which the Sufis call maqam, M-A-Q-A-M, where we have lessons to learn and so on, and we've finished that, it's time to move on. We want to have further growth, but we're still trying to hold on to those old ways. Well, it reminds me, the office I used to have was all on the second floor, and there was a parking lot at ground level. And one time I went out, and there was a flower growing right through the concrete. It's like, wow, how in the world did that flower do that? It's like life is going to find a way to emerge, and it's the nature of our soul to continue to want to grow through our experiences in life, and we're going to continue to grow whether we like it or not sometimes. But the more we try to hold on to the old way of being, the more we get pulled the other way, and then things start really falling apart. And we're thinking, why is the universe doing this to me? Well, actually, it's your wiser self trying to let go. It reminds me, there's a little Buddhist story about someone who got stuck in a tree, and it was dark and they couldn't see, and they're holding on for dear life all night long to a branch, and when the sun comes up, they're 3 inches off the ground. All they had to do was let go. So sometimes we're very reluctant to let go, but to have the experiences that we're longing for, like we have desires to have deeper experiences, and hopefully in both religion and spirituality, we're wanting to have deeper and deeper direct experiences of the sacred, of the mysterious, but what blocks those is to the extent we're holding on to our previous belief system that doesn't allow that as a possibility. At least we didn't think it was a possibility. So I love something Stuart Kaufman, who's a wonderful evolutionary biologist, talks about in the basic proteins in our body. I think there's 21 of them. The number of arrangements of those proteins is more than the number of electrons in the universe, and in the expected lifetime of the entire universe, there could never be every possible combination of those proteins happening. It would take more than the universe is going to exist. But he said the nature of life is for these proteins to, sometimes randomly or through mutation, to organize in what he calls the adjacent possible So these are possible ways of reorganizing that permit life to continue, because some of these combinations, you're toast. You're not going to be alive if they happen. But it's kind of inherent that it's going to want to move in that direction that's going to further life. Well, our process of awakening is like that. It's inherent in our being that we're wanting to move in a direction that's going to further greater light, greater experience of the energy of pure spirit, greater connection with the reality that we are an integral and unique part of. And so our progress is these discontinuous steps. We go along for a while, and then it's not working anymore, and maybe we get disillusioned, give up for a while, we come back, and so on. But then now we're in a different state of being, and we look back and go, oh, finally I realized the lessons that I needed to learn from the experiences that were happening before. And now you're in a higher state of being, a higher state of possibilities of relationship with everything that you're in contact with in manifestation, but also with the divine. You're in a deeper state of possibilities. And guess what? That deeper state of possibilities for you, you're also enabling a greater state of possibilities for the divine as well. So we think all the action is happening on our side of things. It's not. It's happening in the relationship between the two sides. And this is a very, perhaps, different way of thinking about spirituality. So instead of thinking about the spiritual journey being about your own process of journey of awakening, which it is from one point of view, it's really the process of transformation, of the relationship between both sides, the manifest and the transcendent, the human and divine. The relationship is what gets transformed. And in the process of that transformation of the relationship, new things emerge into creation, into existence, that enable new possibilities, not just for you, and not just for what you think of as the divine, but for everything. You've kind of put it into the hopper of that intranet of now new possibilities become available to everything. And so what you thought was a journey for yourself is really a journey for everything, and it's a journey for the one. Two sides of the same thing. Yes?
Could you say something more about Gabriel? I know that's very important in the way you think about this.
Yes, I'm glad you asked that question. So Gabriel, as you know, is historically through the different religions, especially Islam and Christianity, and I think Judaism as well, is the divine messenger. Comes with a message from the divine. And the usual, by most systems of thinking of that, is Gabriel is delivering a message from the divine to a being in manifestation. And a little footnote here, I challenge you to ever find an instance in any scripture of the world of an angel manifesting and giving a message where there's not a human present. Can't happen. The messenger is the go-between of the human and the divine side, and in a way it's the transducer or translator of wisdom that can't be put into words into a way that can be understood by the human side. So that's the usual way of thinking about it. So humorously, I think of it as, well, that's like Gabriel is God's FedEx agent, okay? But we've been talking about this two-way circulation of returning light. So Gabriel not only is manifesting the message, but Gabriel also receives the message that comes from the human side and takes it back to the divine. It's the returning light. It's two sides. And furthermore, I like to think of everything being Gabriel. Everything is a unique manifestation of the divine, down to atoms, subatomic particles, everything. And everything is seeking to reveal its divine nature to everything else. And that that means everything, in a sense, is a Gabriel potentially to everything else, wanting to reveal its divine nature, as are we. Each of us is a Gabriel to everything else. So everything is longing to discover the divine that can only come through each unique manifestation. So we have that desire. We'd like to experience the divine in life, in our inner experiences. But everything else, which is another manifestation of the divine, has that same desire to experience that unique wisdom that can only come through each one of us. Both directions. Okay? So, does that answer your question?
Thank you.
So we usually live in a world of our own making through our imaginations. We don't think of it as imaginations, but it's a powerful collective thought that the world is limited to the experience of the five senses, that's it, that's all that there is. And it's very challenging to break free from that. Sometimes people break free through spontaneous mystical experiences or traumatic experiences. It can happen in different ways. But many times even when someone has an experience like that, they regard it as either an anomaly, or, well, that was interesting, but that doesn't have anything to do with me, or, well, I was just wishful thinking it's not a reality. But actually that experience was a sampling of something much more real than the world that we usually live in. And so we think of miracles as being anomalies because they don't fit in with our assumptions about the way reality, what we thought of as reality, is. But miracles are actually experiences of the real nature of the way that things are, and they seem miraculous because we've been living in an illusory, limited state of perception. We've had collective blinders on that keep us from being able to experience the world in that way. So I mentioned this cosmic intranet and all these different transmissions. All of them are there. They're all available. We usually don't know about them. We usually don't try to tune in to them. And we have to get into a certain state of being to be able to access them. But they're all there. But usually we're just limited. In a way, some of you may know this, that search engines like Google, I guess, think that they're doing you a favor, but gradually over time, when you put something in, Google's going to give you answers consistent with what Google thinks is what you want to get, the way that you think that the world is. So if it's a particular political belief, you're going to get more and more hits about sites where people are in agreement with what you believe. And the more that happens, the more you're going to come to think, well, I know I'm right. Look at all this. I got 7,000 hits here. They're all consistent. Well, it's been filtered. So we live in a filtered reality. And awakening is, one way of describing it, is freeing ourselves from a dream state, a waking dream state that we've been caught up in. So we have a little time, if anybody has any questions, and again, because it's being recorded, if you wouldn't mind coming up, so it'll show up on the recording, but I'd be glad to try to answer any questions, or if you have any comments you want to share about anything you've experienced during our little meditations during this class, I'd love to hear about them. Come up here.
When you started off and you were talking about how we get hooked on something, and so anyway, when I started out in learning, say in the 70s, they told me, they said, clear your mind and it'll come through. And I said, great. And so I sat there for a couple of months, and every time something would start to come through, I'd clear my mind. And so one day I was sitting there in psychometry class, and something started coming through, and I said, well, I'll just let it come through. And it was a beautiful message, and it was in rhythm. And I said, man, you couldn't carry a tune in a basket. So I knew that wasn't me. And then when it got through, it came through in human terms, not spiritual terms. And after that, I learned, you can clear your mind, but when something starts coming to you, you listen. And you covered that quite well.
Thank you. I was imagining Michelangelo wanting to sketch the statue of David before he started building it, and someone gave him one of those, I forget what they're called, the things that you'd write on, but you pull the transparency and it all over. No, this is the kind you just pull the transparency and it disappears. Remember those?
Yeah.
And so he would start drawing it, and he'd be almost finished, and he'd go, well, the arm is not quite right. And so he pulls the thing up and the whole thing just disappears. So we have to have a foundation on our end of things to be able to make sense of an inspiration that comes through. So we have to be able to put it into some metaphor or image or music or movement or poetry that gives us some mode of expressing something that's really an experience that's beyond words. And I call it like making a scaffolding. And it's important for us to be able to do that and to honor that when it comes. And we might say, well, it's like such and such. We're kind of just hinting at it. But then gradually, maybe we come up with a clear way of communicating what we're trying to say. And all the great beings that have ever been and all the religions and spiritual traditions have done this. I mean, all their parables and stories have been metaphors for an experience beyond words, put into a language that hopefully the people at the time could understand. And now we're in an age where there have been all these incredible scientific discoveries, and for me, science is now offering us metaphors for understanding things that previously were just in the domain of the mystics, but now there's a way of explaining this that people can relate to and understand. So there's a cross-pollination between both sides, mysticism and science. So thank you for coming. We have one more of these next week.
Thank you.